Think about the global economy for a second. It's like this massive, incredibly complex machine, right? You've got the gears of trade, risk, and capital all turning in perfect unison to keep things moving. But how did we actually build that engine? Well, long before anyone in Silicon Valley was writing code, humanity was busy writing some brilliant software updates for what was essentially just a physical golden barter economy. And these updates weren't lines of code on a screen, they were sophisticated financial contracts. They're what literally allowed us to conquer vast physical distances, manage some pretty terrifying risks, and mobilize just massive amounts of capital. So, welcome to this explainer. Today we're looking at the true architects of value and how these early financial instruments completely transformed our world.
Okay, let's dive into this explainer's agenda. We're going to explore the 4 distinct tech upgrades that built this global economic machine. First, we'll look at bills of exchange. Second, insurance. Third, bonds. And fourth, the ultimate evolution of the whole shebang, the credit economy.
All right, first up, Section 1, Bills of Exchange, or what we can basically think of as the ultimate logistics hack. To get why this was such a game changer, you really have to put yourself in the shoes of an early merchant. Before the modern era, carrying physical gold across these dangerous, long-distance trade routes was honestly a total logistical nightmare. It was incredibly slow, and one bandit attack could literally wipe out your entire business in a day. The new way was this brilliant abstraction. The bill of exchange completely decoupled the movement of goods from the movement of physical money. So instead of lugging around heavy bags of metal, you just carried a simple written order that could be redeemed by a trusted banking partner somewhere else.
Let's actually walk through how this played out on the ground, just to make it concrete. Step 1. A merchant in Florence wants to buy goods overseas, so he purchases a bill of exchange from his local banker. Step 2. He travels light. Without heavy bags of gold attracting all sorts of unwanted attention, the journey is vastly safer and way faster. Step 3. He arrives in Constantinople, presents that little paper document to a trusted banking partner in that specific network, redeems it, and buys his silk. Just like that.
The hacker innovators of that era, like the famous Medici family, they built this entire international payment infrastructure. And the underlying logic was incredibly powerful. It drastically reduced transaction costs and managed those dangerous logistical risks, all by building a system based purely on trust and reputation rather than heavy physical metal.
Moving on to Section 2, Insurance and Taming the Risk in Trade.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it frames the problem. Sure, bandits on the road were bad, but the unpredictable open sea, that was an even greater system constraint. In the world of maritime trade, a single shipwreck couldn't just ruin a specific voyage. It could completely bankrupt a whole family overnight. It was a massive barrier to entry that kept economies pretty small. Enter risk pooling. This is the mechanism of sharing the burden of loss by paying a small, regular premium. Think about it. While the fate of one single ship is totally a roll of the dice, a large group of ships actually follows a highly predictable statistical pattern. Insurance literally turned unpredictable destruction into a structured, manageable economic variable. It turned a massive barrier into a simple cost of doing business.
And look, this definitely didn't happen overnight. The roots of this concept actually trace all the way back to ancient Mesopotamian bottomry loans, which honestly was essentially ancient maritime gambling. But it was really in 14th century Genoa and Florence that these marine insurance contracts became properly formalized. By systematically conquering uncertainty, merchants finally allowed their economies to undertake much larger, significantly more ambitious ventures.
All right, Section 3, Bonds, the time hack.
So, we've solved distance, right? And we've tamed risk. Now, we're shifting our narrative away from individual merchants and looking at growing states and cities. These entities desperately needed to mobilize massive amounts of capital for wars and vital infrastructure projects. Charting this on a timeline shows a really fascinating evolution. In the ancient era, states basically relied on simple private lending, which severely limited how much a state could actually grow. But fast forward to the 14th century, and city-states began mobilizing the savings of everyday citizens to fund their projects. The true landmark moment, though? That was the year 1694. The creation of the Bank of England institutionalized government borrowing, making public debt a tradable financial asset, and for all intents and purposes, officially birthing modern capital markets.
So, the absolute key takeaway here is this concept, intertemporal exchange. A bond is basically a claim on future repayment. It allows a government to receive capital upfront today in exchange for a promise to pay it back with interest later. It is quite literally borrowing wealth from the future to build the present.
It bridges these medieval inventions directly to the modern infrastructure we use today, channeling the collective wealth of a society into long-term national development. Which brings us to Section 4, the credit economy, the ultimate growth hack.
All right, here's where we hit the climax of this explainer. This is where money transcends physical objects entirely. Money became a network of promises about future value. Just let that sink in for a second. Money was no longer just a physical gold coin you clutched in your hand. Supported by institutions providing a stable platform for transfers like the Bank of Amsterdam and the Bank of England, this self-expanding cycle of trust became the very engine of modern economic expansion.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive paradigm shift that took place. In an economy based solely on existing wealth, you are strictly limited by immediate physical resources. You can only build what you currently have the materials for. But in an economy based on anticipated future wealth, growth is unlocked entirely by credit and trust. The credit economy dramatically decoupled economic growth from the physical, hard limits of metal.
This credit expansion, it triggered a massive, cascading effect. First, it completely decoupled economic activity from immediate physical resources, like we just talked about. Second, it dramatically increased the velocity of money. Money was suddenly moving and working faster than ever before. Third, because of that new speed, it enabled a much larger volume of transactions on the exact same monetary base. And finally, this entire self-expanding cycle is what set the stage for industrial capitalism.
So the tools of global growth, bills of exchange, insurance, bonds, and credit systems, these were absolutely not just dry financial tricks tucked away in dusty history books. These were the actual tools that allowed humanity to build the modern world. They allowed us to conquer distance, manage uncertainty, and mobilize just staggering amounts of capital. With these instruments in place, the foundations of the global financial engine were finally complete.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to close out this explainer. If a network of promises built the modern world, what actually backs our money today? As we've seen, value decisively shifted from physical metal to abstract trust. Keep that question in your mind, because it perfectly teases our next deep dive into the formation of national currency systems. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll see you in the next explainer.